Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Rose in the Ceilings podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Shalini. I am currently a technology professional. I have over 20 years of leadership experience, and I'm a mom of two girls. One actually just went to college, and the other one's a teenager. So I'm super excited to be here.
Well, congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you brought up the fact that you have two daughters, especially one that is in that kind of teenager range, because that's exactly what, we love talking about. So Shalini, you mentioned how you do a lot in wellness earlier, and I'm really wondering what that looks like to you specifically, because I know it can look different from person to person.
Yes. It's interesting because my journey into wellness started, oh boy, maybe about 8-ish years ago because, raising two young kids, full-time job, and then, you're trying to like manage home and run around their classes and drop and pick and do all the chauffeur job, right? So I think all of that together, was, I would say, definitely stressful. And that's really how I started with wellness. And I think I always enjoyed doing some kind of movement, right? And that was just going to various classes, going to the gym. But then I realized I just needed class energy. And so I had a friend of mine who said, you should come and try yoga. And honestly, I was a little worried because, I've seen all these social media posts and being this perfect, model like in those poses. And I was hesitant, but I actually gave it a shot. And honestly, I went to a couple of classes and there was something about yoga that just resonated with me. I know it probably sounds cliche, but it was just, I think the challenges just physically from actually doing the pose, that was one that actually excited me because I used to actually go to every class saying, oh my God, I could do better than my previous day. So it was a physical part, but I also felt just the mental part of it with meditation, with breath work, all of that just started to make me actually feel like I really enjoyed going to class. And then fast forward, I decided to just learn a little more. And then I did my yoga teacher training. So I did my certification. And as part of that, I had to teach yoga. And that's how the whole, I would say, wellness journey started.
Hmm.
Wow. I think it's amazing that you do so many things and that you're still able to prioritize self-care, prioritize exercise and yoga, and even become a teacher in yoga while working in tech, while having two kids. That's amazing. And I'm just wondering how you manage to balance all of that. It's so much.
Oh boy, I don't know where to start, but I will tell you that, the first thing is just embracing imperfection, right? Because you can't do it all. And, it's one of those things I feel as women. And I will say, I guess I'll speak for myself because I come from an Asian, Indian, conservative, family, just generations right down. And I've seen, even my mom, I've seen, everybody else, right? Where a woman is just expected to do things, right? I mean, it's like, you don't just ask questions, you just do things. And for me, it was really hard. I mean, to be honest, just managing kids and doing all of this, right? Because I was still so passionate. I was curious about so many things and even trying to do this wellness or even the time for the yoga certification. I mean, I had to basically give like Saturdays, I had to give all of my Wednesday evening, right? And plus it was homework. So it's kind of almost going to school, right? But I was just passionate and curious and I wanted to do it. So I felt like, for a long time, I never asked for help because I just thought I was supposed to do things. But I think over time, it was really helpful to have mentors. I had a lot of women mentors who were leaders at work, right? And they've all risen, the career ladders, and clearly they've done something, right? So I've always, been talking to them, been asking them, how do you do it, right? And so I think that really helped me with just, confidence, with just getting out of that imposter syndrome, right? When you're stuck with things in that loop. And how do you actually, just get out of that and say, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm only going to do A, B, and C, right? So I think that whole prioritization and time management, I would say, was really key, at least in my journey.
That's for sure. I think a lot of people just pile up on their plate and kind of think, oh, I can do all of this, and then realize they can, and it gets really overwhelming. The fact that you're in tech, especially, is insane to me. I know a lot of people, we're in high school. We know a lot of people right now. We're trying to figure out what to do, right? And a lot of people do want to go into tech, and a lot of them are saying, "Oh, like I don't know if I can do it. Like I know it's like a high pressure job, but I do really want to do this." Especially girls, they're like, "I really want to push for it, but I know it's going to be a challenge." So, is there any words you have for girls who might want to go into tech, and like what maybe they could try to do to help with that?
Absolutely. Actually, I was actually on the advisory board and the STEM panelist for one of the nonprofits. I've actually gone to a couple of like high schools here and, just talked to not just girls, but generally, right, just to high school kids around the STEM options, the career paths, what they can do, right? So that may be a topic on its own. But I think at a high level, I mean, if you ask me, what they can do, I would say, again, even in tech, there are just so many pathways, right? So I mean, gosh, even my own daughters, right? My older one, she's actually doing computer engineering, right? And she really honestly was not quite sure what she wanted to do, right? So there was this whole, a phase of figuring out what she wanted to do. And it was, I would say, the process of elimination. Right. So honestly, we sat down and she was like, okay, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to do humanities. I don't know if I want to do medicine because it's a long road, right? So we literally went through the process of elimination, and we also looked at some of the classes she took. So for example, she did robotics for several years, right? And even when she was a young kid, she used to love Legos. So she was always like this person, like, with just building things. And I felt like that dexterity with the hands, right? Some people, and she also played violin, right? So I think we narrowed down some of those things and we said, all right, then what do you want to do? And then she said, you know what? I actually love building things. So maybe I want to go into engineering so I could do the hardware aspect of it, right? But again, computer engineering gives you both because you kind of look at the software side, but you're also in the hardware, right? So she said, maybe I want to look at a broader field so I can eventually decide, maybe I figure out a niche and a specific area that I actually want to go in and work when I get to a corporate job, right? So that's just an example of how I think we did that process of elimination with her. But again, every kid is different, right? And everybody's journey is going to be different. So I would just say, just explore first, if you have not tried classes, because even when I went to this high school where it's a Title I school, which means more than 80% of the kids are on reduced lunch plans, right? So they don't quite get that opportunity because their parents have never been in tech, and maybe some of them have not even gone to college, right? So they don't quite get that exposure. So one of the things we even talk about is in high school, just go to the clubs, right? Explore things, whether that's robotics, whether that's coding, whatever that may be, but at least go experience some of those things. At least it will, open up your mind, right? To say, do I like this or do I not like it? Or maybe even specific things you may end up saying you actually enjoy more than other things, right? And honestly, in tech, oh my gosh, like even I didn't know this when I came here, and I actually work for Microsoft, right? So I've been at Microsoft close to over 15 years now, right? And I've seen folks who do all kinds of things. You can be a project manager, you can be a product, you can be a program, you can, oh my God, you can be a developer. Like I can go on and on, right? So you can do so many different things. And I also feel like girls in general, they also get just intimidated, right? And you go into this imposter syndrome of like, oh my gosh, can I actually do this? Right. But I feel like it's super important to understand and even break it down in terms of your strengths, what you would like to do. And then now, like, oh man, in this chat GPT space, I would say you can search up anything and everything. And you can say, these are the things I love to do. Can you give me career options? Right? But I'm just saying that's probably one way to even start thinking about it. But I would say definitely go explore, clubs, talk to folks. I would say I would highly encourage. I mean, I tell my girls all the time that they should find mentors in different age groups, right? I mean, they have to find mentors who are probably just senior to them, like maybe 1 or 2 years older than them. But then they should find other mentors who are working, right? Or even just started a job. And they should find another mentor who's probably 3 or 4 years into their job, because that, I think, would really give them a very wide just experience, right? Because they would learn a lot from, and not do the same mistakes, is what I would say.
I love, love, love this advice on finding your passion and what really clicks with you. Because I think that's one of the questions we get the most as podcast hosts, with young girls saying, "How do I find that thing that clicks with me?" And I think that you're totally right about exploring new things, and it's so accessible now with the internet. But it's
Exactly.
almost like an overflux of information sometimes with like ChatGPT, social media, and
Yes.
all of these different sources shooting at us. So I'm wondering what your advice is to maintain that wellness and maintain that well-being with this overflux of information.
That's a great question, and this is what I keep telling my girls too is, oh my gosh, you got to limit your phone usage. You got to limit your gadget time, right? So I know it's easy to say that, but I know everything, I mean, starting from homework to all of it, right, happens with gadgets. So it's really hard, right? And especially I think for me, like after being in this wellness space, there's almost like this digital detox time that everybody needs, right? And regardless of your age, I mean, you could be a high schooler, you could be a middle schooler, you could be working, you could be, I don't know, like, middle aged, doesn't matter. But I almost feel everybody needs that time of just digital detox, right? And so, oh boy, how do they even start doing this? Like I said, I mean, for me, I would really recommend, if I think about wellness, right? There are a few things I would say, just high level buckets. One is embracing self care, like finding time to just think about what self care works for you, right? Again, there's a plethora of information, right, on just self care. But I would say, even if it's just as simple as a journal, right? Like just take 5 minutes at the end of the day, right? And I think it's super important to have a gratitude journal because, again, we're all so busy just doing, one thing after another, but I don't think we ever pause to just appreciate what we have. So I really think having a gratitude journal, even spending 5 minutes a day, right, is an awesome day just to even start, or even maybe when you end your day, right? But at some point in time. And also, I would say, meditation and mindfulness. But again, I think that's a topic on its own because that's a very broad term when I say that, because I know people are going to have all kinds of questions. How do I even start with meditation? Because I can't even sit down for 5 minutes. That's the common question, right? I get from everybody. So I would say, just practicing mindfulness could be as simple as just savoring everything that you do. Like, let me just give a super simple example. Like you're having a cup of hot chocolate. Even just experiencing that, like holding the cup, just feeling that warmth, just sipping it, right? I think we don't even do that today because we're always multitasking. You're doing this, but you're watching TV or you're on the phone or you're listening to something. Or so I just feel like meditation is the next level, but even start with just being mindful, I think is almost like the first tip, I would say, right? In this whole umbrella of self-care. You can do so many different things, but like I said, I would say maybe start with journaling, start with just being mindful, right? In just small things. And you just start small. Again, you have to start somewhere, right? So you start small and at least develop and practice it, right? And then I would say just creative outlet, right? That could be music, art, I don't know, sports, right? There's so many different ways, but having that creative outlet, I think, is also super important to just practice as part of self care. I would say, gosh, I can talk all about integrative nutrition, which is really what holistic wellness is all about. And if I have to really break that down, I would say two broad categories. Okay. So there is a concept of primary foods and there's a concept of secondary foods. And if I break that down, primary food is really four major buckets. Okay. So relationships, movement, so like physical movement, career, because that's where financial independence comes. Fourth is spirituality, right? Again, each one of these I know can be a topic on its own, but I feel like those 4 buckets, right? If somebody can even focus on those primary foods, that's really where you start with holistic wellness or even integrative like nutrition. Secondary food, you'll be surprised, is really the food that you put on your plate. So when you think about it, primary food is what's off your plate. Those are the 4 buckets that I just talked about. And secondary food is what you actually put on your plate, which is, again, I mean, we all know about the various diets and everything. But if I have to break that down, having, just rainbow colors, right, on your plate, fresh fruits, vegetables, whatever you can find, reducing your processed food, right, I think is super important, right? Which is obviously what I have to tell my daughter now in college, right? When you're having food in your dorm, like make sure, there's not a lot of all processed food, but you're actually eating, more healthier vegetarian. I mean, at least we're vegetarians, but like more of those fresh foods and less of the processed foods. So I don't know, hopefully that helps. But I would say, again, it almost feels to me like each of this, I can speak for a long time, but given the high level, summary here, I would say those are just some of the ways even to get started with wellness.
Do you have any advice to the people who might be like, oh, I really wish I could get into wellness. I really wish I could meditate more. I want to do my passions more, but I just don't have time. Like, would you have any advice to people who are like, I really wish I could squeeze this in my my calendar. I just can't.
Wow. That's a $1 million question, because I wish sometimes I have more than 24 hours in a day because of all the things that I would love to do. But like I said, you know what? Even just the smallest thing of being mindful, right? I would say is even just the easiest practice. If you say you have no time, right? Even let's say you're walking to the bus, or, maybe you're just cooking a meal, or, you're just, I don't know, doing the simplest things, but being completely present in that moment, I would say really will set you up when you get to the practice of meditation. Because I have seen, at least in my experience, for a lot of people, it is really hard to just say, practice meditation. Just sit there for 5 minutes. It's impossible for a lot of people to do that, right? But I feel like when you practice mindfulness over time, you actually really, without even you realizing it, you're actually tuning your mind and your body. And that's really what you need when you get to that meditation and that practice, right? So I guess I would say if you have really no time, but you want to do something, I would say, yes, at least start with being mindful of what you're doing, right? And then make healthy choices, even with what you're eating. Because end of the day, I strongly believe in, again, the mind-body connection, right? Because if you eat healthy, it's going to help you in doing all your other things that you want to do, right? But when you don't have your fundamentals, right? When you don't prioritize sleep, for example, or you don't prioritize eating healthy, all of that impacts everything else that you're going to do. So they're all just so intertwined. Like, I don't even know how you can separate out the two things, right? So if you don't have time, I would say that's what you do. Just start with even being mindful and trying to at least pick healthy food habits.
For sure. Shalini, you talked a little bit about, your experience in wellness, and you've also talked about like your experience in tech. To me, when I first heard you were coming on, I was like, these two seem like two very different like circles to me. So I'm wondering, how has your time in tech maybe like helped you develop these wellness habits? Like, is there a link there that you've kind of like gotten used to?
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned this before as well, right? Where you said a lot of girls think about tech as like super intimidating or super stressful. And so, they kind of debate even getting into tech. And guess what? After being in that corporate world for over 20 years, I know why wellness, at least for me, became personally super important. And now I realize a lot of other people are in the same boat, because when you become a parent, it adds on, right? And even before, I guess I was a parent, right? It was just working and trying to prioritize and then not getting stressed and not getting, intimidated or overwhelmed. And I was also, I would say, interestingly, my first interview at Microsoft, it was a panel where I had 5 men, okay, who interviewed me. So, I still remember, and I was obviously pretty young at that time where, I was pretty overwhelmed, right? I mean, I was intimidated, and guess what? I'll add another twist to this. I was actually pregnant. I was 7 months pregnant. Yes. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to walk into this room and I'm sure they're going to like look at me being pregnant and I don't even think I'm going to get this job. Right. And actually, even if I rewind a bit of even applying to this actual job, right, my husband was like, oh, you should apply. And I told him, no, when I look at that job description, I mean, honestly, there were several things in that job description where I said, I don't even think I qualify. Like maybe I shouldn't even apply. He said, you never know. Just apply and we'll see what happens. And so honestly, that was the only reason I actually even applied for that job. And when I called in for this interview, and then I was like, oh my God, now I'm like 7 months and I'm walking to this room and I'm like, I'm looking at everybody there. I don't think this is going to work. Right. So it was again, this imposter syndrome thing just kicking in. But guess what? I went in, I just, walked through the whole interview, all the questions, everything. And I'm sure they probably looked at me. They knew I was pregnant, all of that, right? It didn't matter. But I was definitely super stressed, right? Just even going through that interview. But anyway, fast forward, I got the job and, I basically, worked there and I've been at the company, obviously, right, for so long and for so many years and different teams. But I would say for me, wellness really started because of just prioritization of life in general, right? And for me, when people say work-life balance, I think about this more as work-life harmony. Because to me, if you can't bring the best version of yourself to work, I don't think you can actually do a good job. And how do you do that? How do you bring the best version of yourself? When you actually take care of yourself. To me, that's wellness, right? So for me, when I look at work life, it's that harmony, it's that integration of both. And I think more and more like people are actually realizing that. And there's a reason why there are so many ERGs, basically employee resource groups focused on wellness. There are wellness activities. There are wellness coaches. There is, oh my gosh, there's a plethora of information on just wellness, right? So I feel that connection, super important, right? And for me, again, it became all the more important when I became a parent, when I had to juggle everything, right? But I think it's equally important now for folks, even when they're not parents, even for those who are just starting out, right? Having a career in tech. I speak to a lot of, the young folks who are just starting off. And they always say, yes, they're stressed out or they're not sure how do they balance everything, right? And that's why people are still doing a lot of wellness activities, right? I see them. I see folks in yoga classes. I see folks in meditation classes. And they've just started their career in tech. So at least for me, that was kind of my journey into, the wellness space.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That was definitely like super touching to me. I'm just wondering because I'm curious. You mentioned how when you interviewed for this job, again, it was just a panel of just men. But you've also talked about how like over the years you've been in like multiple groups, multiple leadership positions. So I'm just wondering, has the situation with like women in tech gotten better since you've been in this industry? Like, are there any like patterns you've been noticing? Like, where are we at now?
Yeah. Oh, I think absolutely. I would say in the last, I would say what, maybe few years for sure, I've seen a huge difference in women just, coming into the tech world, right? Just more girls going to college for STEM degrees. I feel like all of that has definitely improved in the last, I would say, at least 5+ years, right? Because I would say prior to that, it was definitely a challenge. I mean, there would be conversations, there would be meetings where you would really, be the only girl in the room and you would feel really awkward. And you would, just get shot down or you'd just be dismissed, right? Like if you're trying to make a point. So I feel definitely a lot of that has improved over time, for sure. I just feel the opportunities and the awareness is a lot more in the last several years.
I'm really glad to hear that. Especially
Yes.
for, our peers. You mentioned girls going to college for STEM degrees. I've talked to so many of our classmates saying, "Oh, like I'm so scared," because we're in high school now. A lot of people are already thinking for their applications. They're like, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm so stressed." So do you have any specific advice for that, for like the girls who are planning on getting their degrees in STEM and are kind of lost right now?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question because I know last year we went through the whole college application. At least I went through that with my daughters. So I think that's still fresh in my mind. And I know I will be going through that again with my second next year, right? So all of this is super fresh in my mind, right? So again, like I said, it's one of those things, right? You can't just force yourself to say, yes, I'm going to like go into STEM, right? And I'm going to do this. So that's why when I mention, it's super important to get familiar with just activities, with clubs, with talking to mentors, talking to people who are already in the field to even understand what do they do and do they actually like things that they do, right? Because you can't just say, you want to just go to STEM because everybody's doing it, right? I don't know if that's going to fly, right? So I think it's really important to do your homework, right, through high school. But of course, if you're already in 12th grade, I mean, it's fine, right? I mean, it's never too late because you can still go into college and figure out, right, what do you actually like or not like. And who knows, you may go into, a certain degree and a path, and maybe in a year or two, you may decide, oh my gosh, maybe not, right? And you may want to change some things. So I would, again, I think it's advice depends on which phase of your high school journey you're in. So if you're asking me you're a freshman in high school and you're trying to see what do I need to do if I want to get into STEM, then I would definitely say try all the activities related to STEM and figure out what you like and not like, right? And check out all the clubs. And if you can do things outside of school, do that, right? I mean, gosh, like the information now and the opportunities that did not exist a couple of years ago, there's a lot. So you could literally volunteer at places, right? You could say, I want to come and help with something. I want to just, come and help you with your tech department, right? I mean, there's so many nonprofits who are willing to just, have you come and volunteer. But at least I'll give you an opportunity to come and see what it even looks like, right? So I would say clubs, volunteering opportunities, talk to mentors, right? Could be just seniors in high school or maybe even folks in college or even people who've just started jobs, right? Like you will get completely different perspective. So I would definitely suggest all three of those if you're just starting off high school. But if you're telling me you're already in 12th and you're applying and you're like, oh my gosh, like I could have done all of these things, but I don't know what to do now. And what do I apply or which field do I even go into? If that's a situation, I would say maybe keep your major or your options a little broader, right? Like, so for example, like I just said, even with my own daughter, right? When we went through this, like computer science probably kind of just puts you a little narrow in a path. And not everybody would have tried coding. Not everybody would have done a lot of those things. So maybe you're not sure if that's what you want to do, right? But again, when you think about computer engineering, you're putting out your hardware and your software pieces, right? So it gives you a little broader perspective. But again, we all know engineering is going to be hard, right? So there's no two ways about it. And maybe in high school, you've taken math, you've taken physics, and you probably already know what's your strength, right? So I would say you also should play to your strengths, right? When you pick a major. And even with STEM, there are so many options now. I mean, like you could go into data science and then decide you double major once you go into college, right? That's still tech. And, I mean, gosh, I know so many people come in and they, get into program management or project management in tech, right? So that could also come from just a business degree. And maybe later on, you decide to do some tech classes. So you kind of get that technology background as well, right? So I think there's so many different combinations of how you can do this. But again, I think it all stems down to the same fundamentals, right, that I was talking about. You have to explore those opportunities, you have to make that connection and that network, because I think that's what's going to really help you figure out what's, even your strength. If you don't even know that, then I think that will help you even figure that out in the first place.
That is some amazing advice. Thank you so much. I love it. I guess to wrap us up, I want to ask for
Sure.
the young girls who might be watching, trying to build their confidence to explore these new things in order to find out what they like and what they're passionate about. Do you have any advice for people building their confidence to get there?
Yes. I've seen that with a lot of girls. Again, like I said, I mean, just coming from my own background and just cultural upbringing as well, I've seen that and experienced it myself, right? Where I used to be in the self-doubt, when I started even in college, when I started work, all of it. So I would say, first thing is just embrace things, embrace failures, growth. It's okay to make mistakes, but it's okay to also ask questions, right? And sometimes just put yourself out there, right? And I think taking that first step is the hardest, right? And for me, it definitely was. And it's interesting, if I have to give an example, when I started working, right, the first few years, it was really hard for me to even ask somebody if they could be a mentor. Fast forward, maybe 5-ish years, right, into my career after, I actually realized I could ask that. There was nothing wrong. And I actually reached out to folks, honestly, I did not even know before, right? But I would see them in some of the team meetings. I would see some of the work they were doing, right? Or I would observe them in a meeting and I would say, wow, maybe I actually want to be like that person someday. And I just sent a note saying, hey, I loved how you did X, Y, and Z. Would you be okay if I just set up, time for a coffee or for a chat? Guess what? Maybe I would have asked like 10 people. At least 3 folks came back and responded right away and said, oh, I would love to. Right? And that's how I actually started even building that network of mentors. So I think hardest thing for most girls is taking that first step. Right? And again, that could be just bias, perceptions, could be, your upbringing, your culture. It could be so many things, right? Or maybe just media. I mean, you see it all the time. You always hear this all the time where, I feel like sometimes even too much of that information also just makes girls feel less confident to even get out there, right? So I would just say, just that's the first step. Just take the first step. And what's the worst that can happen? Somebody can tell you no, or somebody may not respond, right? But you're not losing anything, right? End of the day, I mean, that's what I tell my girls. And that's the same advice I would tell all the girls out there, right? Is take that first step. And if you don't hear, it's all right. Keep trying, right? Sometimes it's like a job application. You apply to 100 jobs, right? Maybe you hear from like 3 or 5, right? But that doesn't mean you stop trying. You're still going to do it, right? And you never know when that right opportunity or that connection actually works. Because that's how, at least for me, it's worked when I've changed teams, I've changed jobs, right? Because I've had a mentor who's told someone else, hey, like Shalini's looking for a role. Like, do you know something? And then that person has actually told someone else. So sometimes it's just that chain. So you don't know who's that first person who's actually even going to help you. So I think it's super important for girls just to, get out there, ask questions. If you don't know something, it's okay to say you don't know. There's nothing wrong about it, right? Because we all have to learn. There's always a starting point, right, for learning. So that I would say, just be my, just tips, high level, just to start with confidence and just be out there and just embrace things and have a growth mindset.
Thank
That's
you
so
so
awesome.
much.
No
Thank you
worries.
for everything you come on and talk to us about. There's just so much advice in this episode. I think people are gonna
I know. That's why I
love
said
it.
all of the topics could be a topic on its
A
own, I
whole
feel.
separate series, yeah, for sure. Just to cap it off, is there anything you want to shout out? Like any handles to plug, anything, just so we can know like where to reach you?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, I would, say my YouTube. Actually, I started a podcast just recently around wellness. And so really the, goal of the podcast is to bring holistic wellness and self-care advice just by, talking to practitioners around the globe. So I've
Mhm.
actually just done four guest speakers so far. And I have a lot of guest speakers already that are coming up just talking about various topics. So I would love, for folks to just check out youtube.com/ at Let's Talk Wellness with Shal. That's the YouTube podcast link. And also on Instagram, it is Shalini Thyagaraja. It's a long name, but I'm happy to, obviously share the links, right, as part of this podcast. But I would love for folks to listen to it, right? And I'm happy to hear any feedback. And also for any individuals out there, right, as you're going through either college application or you're trying to find a job or you don't know where to start or just even confidence, right, or just general topics like that, I'm more than happy to do that because I coach a lot of folks, and you can check out mindspacejourney.org. That's my website just for coaching services. But again, I'm more than happy to just have a free discovery call and talk to folks who just want to get started and they're trying to figure out how to go about life.
Thank you so much for coming on again.
Yes.
Yeah, this
Thank
was a
you.
great time.
Thank you for having me. And I loved all these questions. And like I said, it feels like I'm just talking to my girls because this is all the advice and what I keep telling them. So I hope they will actually listen to this as well. But I really hope this helps the girls out there who are going through this journey. And definitely reach out. I'm more than happy to just have a conversation and help guide anybody in terms of just tech or wellness or I don't know, high school or college apps because I just went through all of that. I'm more than happy to be a mentor and a coach. So feel free to reach out through my website or through, the social media channels. I'm more than happy to have a conversation.